Thanks, bear with me a little bit. I've got a bit of a sore throat and I've been teaching all day, so hopefully I won't suddenly lose my voice in the middle of this, but I think we'll be okay. I guess I should say Excel is also pretty much always highly ranked. We are also a top-rated place to work. We do lots of things that aren't government too, if you ever want to try something like in the private sector or nonprofits. Fairly diverse portfolio, a lot of great folks. So check us out if you're looking. All right, this is me. There's kind of an embarrassing amount of words on this slide. I crammed them all into one place so that we can forget them quicker. I've been an Agilist for a little over 10 years now. Almost all of that, I would say, except for maybe the last 6 months, has been for government, primarily in the federal sector. Lots and lots of agencies, also a few state governments. As far as certifications and scaling go, I've done an unfortunate amount of scaling. These days I'm primarily a Scrum trainer, so that's a little more fun, because I get to just talk about problems instead of solve them, so that's fun. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So, the title for this talk is Qualitative Portfolio Management. The idea behind that is really how do we prioritize in a way where we can build consensus around choices. Whether we're talking about one team or we're talking about very big engagements with many teams. Prioritization for me tends to be one of the biggest sticking points in any Agile engagement I've ever had. Again, regardless of size. If we can get somebody who's actually allowed to make decisions, getting them to be willing to make choices is often a problem. Particularly, I don't know about you, but a lot of my customers in the public sector, does everybody here know what a backlog is? Yeah, okay, I thought you would in this room, so that's cool. There's always this permanent invisible item at the top of their backlogs, which in this town reads, keep me out of the post. Right? Whatever happens, it can't go so wrong that I end up in the Washington Post, or that someone launches an Inspector General investigation against me or whatever. We tend to work in very risk-intolerant environments where we can't ever try stuff, and lots and lots of people basically have the ability to say no, but it's not really clear who's supposed to be saying yes to stuff. So that's the notion behind this. So let's think a little bit about prioritization. Where do priorities come from? If we're the product owner for an effort, or we're supporting the product owner for an effort, or the portfolio management team, if it's a team of teams kind of thing, collecting opinions about priorities is pretty easy. In fact, as soon as people figure out that they can give us their opinion about what to do, they find us. They descend from the ceiling on ropes to tell us about what thing we can do for them next, please. The problem we get is that their interests don't necessarily overlap, right? If we were to make a Venn diagram of this, some of those interests will be shared among some of those groups. Many of them will be diverse. And the problem we get stuck in is, what do we do when the team and users want to do something, but the customer doesn't think it's a good idea? What if the customer wants us to do something, but we know it's a really bad idea? What if the customer can't maintain vision long enough for us to ever finish a thing? So how do we deal with that? All right, at least we can usually agree on this kind of stuff. If we're doing Agile as a service, whether we're Scrum teams or safe teams or whatever we are, hopefully at least our teams get to be the arbiter of what's possible, and then inside of that bubble of what is possible, probably whoever's paying for the work gets the loudest voice. But the question of who's paying for the work isn't always clear either. Okay, so maybe we need some prioritization techniques. There are a bunch of them out there. On the financial side, for example, net present value or return on investment or discounted payback, what they are. I don't know about you, those usually don't apply in the work that I do because we aren't selling anything. It's mandated, we have to do this. The users don't get a choice as to whether or not to adopt our thing because it's going to be the only thing. Or actually, let's be honest, there might be 4 other things that are really duplicative, but still, we're going to tell them they have to use our thing. Okay, so what about non-financial ones? There are a bunch of those too. There are some issues with them. So maybe the most common ones that I tend to run into are Moscow, particularly if someone is using DSDM as an overall scaling framework. Theme screening, excuse me, And relative weighting can also be useful. As can, who here has done weighted shortest job first? Yeah, a few people. If you're doing safe, probably you've had some experience with that. That's really just kind of a flavor of relative weighting. So let's take a look at how these work. If you're not familiar with McConnell, McConnell says we can figure out what to do as a program if we just make 4 buckets and put stuff in the buckets. Must have, should have, could have, won't have. That sounds easy. Wait, why is my thing in the should have bucket and not the must have bucket? All of our things are must haves. Put them in the must have bucket. Okay. Well, we can all agree that this one dumb thing is a won't have. Great. So we solved one question, and now I still have to find some way to rank inside of that. I find Moscow for this reason not to be super helpful in a lot of the situations that I run into. Maybe we could do something that looks sort of mathematical like theme screening. Theme screening looks like this. Let's pick some organizational goals that we're trying to do, like increase revenue or market share, make our solution easier to run, right? Decrease our O&M tail. That'd be cool. Then what we can do is we pick an item from our backlog that we think is a baseline. It's kind of in the middle on all of these goals. Well, that's not trivial, but okay, let's say we do that. We find something that's kind of in the middle on all these goals. Then what we can do is we compare everything else in our programmatic backlog to that baseline item. If it seems to deliver more value on one of these indicators, plus. If it's less, it's a minus. If it was the same, we would mark it 0. And then you add up scores. You get a point for every plus, you subtract a point for every minus. That looks kind of like this. Hey, that's a way to rank them. This is a little problematic. One, because everything becomes like a binomial comparison. And if I have more than 2 dimensions, it might be hard to find a good baseline item. If I pick an item that ends up being fairly low on all of these indicators, everything else outranks it, and then they all end up with the same score. They're all 3s. I don't have a way to distinguish, right? Or if I pick something that's too much on any one of these, and everything ends up equally below it, okay, probably doesn't do me a lot of good. How about relative weighting, which is also how weighted shortest job first works. With this, what I'm going to do is I've got, let's say, 3 things, A, B, and C. I'm going to score those efforts on their benefit potential, 0 to 9. Okay. Also, I'm going to score them on their penalty, which is what bad things will happen to us if we don't do them. So benefit is hooray, and penalty is, oh, we're going to jail, or whatever it is. Also scored 0 to 9. Then I add those scores up. So for this A item, we decided to have a benefit of 5, and a penalty of 2. Those total values of 7. I can then express that as a percentage of the total value of everything in my matrix. So this A item, whatever it is, it's about 39% of the value. So that's its value. The relative weighting part now is I'm going to scale that value based on its size. So if all the backlog items inside of this weight, add up to a 5, let's say, or maybe this is a single team and that's just one backlog item and the team called it a 5, that's its size. That's 50% of everything that's in our matrix, because we have a total of 10 points of work across these 3 items. So then what you do is you scale the value percentage by the cost percentage. So there you go. You come up with these numbers. They don't mean a whole lot. But the idea is we would go from higher to low. So whatever the biggest number is, that should be what we work first. The logic behind relative weighting makes sense. It's that if 2 things are the same value, we should do the smaller one first so that we have time to do other things. Okay. And if they're the same size, we should do the more valuable one first. That makes sense. Okay, you have a question?
You're summing a benefit and a penalty.
Yep.
Wouldn't you divide them?
No, because the penalty is also kind of a benefit. The penalty is
It's
the logic is a little
minimization
twisted.
of the penalty. Is
Yeah,
that right?
it's what is the benefit of avoiding the penalty for not
Okay.
doing this thing. It is kind of a forced consideration, though, right? The problem with this, and this is the same issue with weighted shortest job first, all of these frameworks really boil down to because I said so. So if our issue with Moscow, for example, if I back up, is why is my thing in the could have bucket instead of the must have bucket? Just because I pretended that these things have numerical value and relative weighting, why is my thing a 5 as opposed to a 9? Or why is the penalty higher than the other person's thing? What does 0 mean versus 9? I don't know. So if I score things using relative weighting, or if I do WSJF, I'm still basically just picking values and then telling people, no, it's fine because I scored them. I'm really just making choices, but I'm pretending that there are like numbers behind these. So this is the problem I run into a lot. It really comes down to, but I said so. And if I could do that, if I can get away with just making the choices, that's cool, that works out for product ownership, but I don't need any of these kind of fig leaves, if that's what I can get away with. So the issue I run into a lot is, well, what if they're all good ideas? What if they're all basically must-haves? What if the penalties for everything are 9? Right? What if it's, do we build the feature we really need right now, or do we fix the security issue that just got discovered, and if we don't, we're going to lose our authority to operate? Both of those things could potentially totally kill us as a program if we don't do those things. They're both going to take a lot of work. We both need them right now. How do we make these choices? Especially when they're kind of apples and oranges. So we need something more than just because I said so. All right. So what we really need to do is find a way to use prioritization in a transparent and open way to engineer consensus when there is not one. To make people be okay with the choices we're making. And especially to be okay with the not now, later, when we have to tell people no. Right? Because we're never really saying no, we're just saying not this sprint, not this programming, not this whatever the period of time is. So what I did was, back years ago now, I was coaching a scaled effort at the National Reconnaissance Office. I've worked for all of our space agencies. They are awesome. It's fun to work there because you feel really important and cool stuff gets done. The interesting thing about the NRO is, anybody ever worked there? You're not supposed to put your hand up. Just kidding, it's fine. I put it on
the CIA or
yeah. So the thing about the NRO that sometimes people don't know unless you read Wikipedia is they don't have any employees. They have a lot of contractors, that's cool. They have a lot of federal people who work in their very, very nice campus of buildings, just down 28 there. But none of them work for the NRO, they're all detailed. Primarily from agency, from NGA, from the Air Force, from other governments that we partner with on stuff, whatever it is. Nobody sits in a chair at the NRO for longer than about 2 years. That's a weird situation. First of all, often all of the people doing the work on behalf of the government know more about it than the actual government customer, because they've been in their chairs for like 30 years, because those clearances are hard to get and the knowledge is hard to come by. Also, when I talk about risk-averse environments, wow, are they risk-averse? Because all you want to do, if you've been detailed to the NRO, is not screw up so badly that you can't come back to whatever your home agency is. All you need is to have a successful tour somewhere else, so you can put that check mark in your performance plan and advance through your career path. Because details are part of your career, you have to go do them. And you can't screw things up when you go there. That makes it really, really hard to get anybody to accept risk. The other problem that I had there is that everybody that I worked with, or that we sort of worked for, we were a mission-enabling thing. So it's not folks in the field with guns, or launching missiles, or making strategic intelligence decisions. It's people who are standing up support systems, like identity management is what we were working on. Everybody needs it to work, but nobody cares about it unless it's broken. That's cool. Everybody in the building literally outranks my direct customer. And they wear their rank on their sleeve. So if my customer is a lieutenant colonel, but a full bird colonel walks up and says, go do my thing, even though we don't really work for that person, we kind of have to go do that thing now. So how do I make it so that the LTC can tell the actual C to wait, right? Or how do we say no to a general from a different chunk of the organization? How do we say no to the Pentagon? How do we tell Congress not yet, right? We need some kind of way. This didn't get elevated up to the point where we could tell Congress to go do something else, but whatever. What I came up with was, what if we redesign relative weighting? Instead of just these arbitrary benefit and penalty scores that don't make a lot of sense, what if we scored stuff on things that actually mattered and that we're officially supposed to do? So that's what we did. I call it quantified relative weighting or quantitative relative weighting, or QRW, because all the other stuff is a mouthful, especially when your throat is sore. Anyway, it looks like this. It's kind of a 1, 2, 3 approach. I've used it in a lot of places now, and it has almost always worked for me, except in one circumstance. which is a little embarrassing because a former coworker from that place is here. Anyway, so U.S. courts is the only place where this has not gone over. But anyway, here we go. First up, determine what your actual objective institutional goals are. That's not a trivial exercise. But what are we officially supposed to be doing and why? What are the underlying market or performance or application conditions that we're trying to get to? Why did they set aside money to go do this work in the first place? What was the justification? That's probably where we can find some of these. Once we know what they are, frame some kind of an assessment criteria in our matrix based on those things that will help us tell if we're making a difference with any one particular program level initiative. That's abstract, don't worry, I'll make it more concrete in a minute. And then once we have a way to actually assess value on those dimensions, then like relative weighting, we'll scale value based on size. So it's still the same logic as relative weighting. We still want to do the smaller, more valuable thing first, whatever that is, that's the idea. Okay, so here's how this looks in practice. First up, what are the objective actual goals of what this program is supposed to be doing? Is part of why they hired us because it, at the moment, takes 3 years to put something in production, and the goal is for it to be taking weeks? Okay, cool. Speed of delivery is now an official goal. The nice thing about that also is we can measure it objectively. We can figure out what our current speed is, we can set a target, we can also set an ideal or a max goal at which we no longer care about this thing. If we get to a point where we can deliver features every single sprint, that's maybe fast enough for now. Maybe down the road we want to be able to do it multiple times in a day like Amazon or something, fine. But for right now, let's just, if we can get to once a sprint, that would be the best it could ever get. If we could get to once a quarter, we would be happy, right? So that kind of puts the boundaries on where we're trying to get to. Maybe our issue is, yeah, we're running these solutions, but they're super brittle. And we spend a lot of time and money fixing broken things and helping users navigate our system. Well, we can measure that in all kinds of ways. In this case, how many just requests for tier 2 and 3 help desk do we get every month or whatever the increment is? Currently, if we're getting 100 a month, if we could cut that in half, that would be an amazing amount of time and labor savings. Cool. If we get down to 10, that would be so few compared to what we used to get that I could be officially persuaded to not care about this for a while and do something else. The third goal here, in this case, if they're ingesting data from raw sources and we're trying to get it into a production environment, what's the cycle time for that behavior? If it currently takes us 40 days to get new data available for production use, that's a really long time, especially if the data turns over a lot. Could we get it down to 10? Could we get that increment less than however often the data turns over? That would be awesome. And then ideally, could we just make it push button? Could we get it inside of a day? That would be great. Maybe we've got 3 of these. Maybe we've got 5 of these goals, whatever it is. I'm just using 3 for the sake of illustration. So now we need some kind of an assessment matrix. I can't give you one of these. You would have to negotiate it for yourself amongst your stakeholders. But what this is if the goal is to reduce delivery speed, what would be a 10 on a scale of 10 to negative 10? And we just pick something. And then we walk that number around and say, would this be the best you could ever possibly hope to get? And maybe that's like our ideal value on whatever our overall objectives are. That's fine. And we have a scale here. You could use different numbers in your scale. You don't have to use this one. This is just the one that I most often use. The idea here is, on the positive side, 1, 5, and 10, these are benefits on whatever this dimension is. A 10 should be like a knock it out of the park benefit. If we do a 10, maybe we don't have to pay attention to this goal anymore, level of benefit. A 1 would be a small change, a 5 somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be a linear scale, it can be geometric, whatever makes sense. 0 is, there's no difference in this particular thing. Because not everything is going to move every needle. So some things are going to make some variables move and others. I put in a negative side because sometimes things have actual costs associated with them. So maybe it's a benefit in terms of how fast we can deliver stuff, but at the moment it makes our system more brittle, so there's a penalty there, and it would end up with a negative score. Does that make sense? I see some nodding, I see some confusion. So the idea is, there might be sometimes things that we feel like we have to do that are really good ideas that don't always equal benefits all the way across the board. So for example, If program level budget year over year is one of our targets and we want to shrink the amount of money it takes to operate all of our systems, there might be some features we want to build that require us to stand up some expensive software appliance. We're going to take a penalty in the overall programmatic cost because we're buying software and hardware. But the feature benefit might be huge, however it is when measured. So there you go, you have this scale you set up. Again, maybe you've got 3 criteria, maybe you've got 5, maybe you've got 10, that's fine. Oops, back here. And then what we do is we're going to add up their scores across the board. So item A, big benefit to cycle time, no difference on calls for service or how long it takes us to put data in production. And its size is about an 8. So just like the other ones, we just add up the total values, we divide by the sizes, that gives us these scaled scores, and we would build them in rank order from big to low. You'll notice that even though this item C is much smaller than item A, and its benefit is overall lower, because they're sort of proportional, its score ends up being very close to item A. And that's the idea. So that's kind of the 1, 2, 3 framework. Does that make sense? Questions about that? This is going to be kind of a fast document. Go ahead.
Minus 10
Yep.
scenario.
Yep.
Scenarios. So that's if you totally, your goal is to obviously increase cycle time for the first delivery speed for your feature. If for some reason some feature took greater 4 or greater sprints.
Well, no, so it's not so much for the given feature, it's end-to-end overall in this particular criteria. So maybe there's something we need to build that for some reason has a huge impact and makes us slower overall to deliver features. That would be the negative scores. Negative scores don't always make sense. And if they don't, we don't have to have them for a given item. We might have a positive to negative range on some things like budget. For security items, for example, I tend to scale them instead by time. So if an ISO or some other security officer says, you have to fix this by a certain date or you lose your ATO, instead of scoring 10 to negative 10, I'm just going to say, if I have to do it this year, it's a 1. If I have to do it this quarter, it's a 5. But if I have to do it this sprint, it's a 10. Does that make sense? Because it's a 1-0 thing. Like, I have to do it. It's just a question of how soon. And that becomes kind of my scaling factor. I could also use different numbers. They don't all have to be in the same range. Like with the security example, if we have to do it right now, we could give that a 50. So that it always trumps whatever's in the matrix. Yeah. You gonna say?
Yeah. So the cycle 4 sprints that you're talking about, so this is a team-based number, or in case of portfolio level, you could have multiple teams and their delivery speeds could be different based on the team's experience and skill set and all those things.
It could be. This would kind of assume that we have either a shared or at least a substantially similar value chain.
It's more
So, like if we're a bunch of different development teams, but then we have an overall infrastructure team who's standing up our DevOps tooling and stuff like that, yeah, maybe we're all sort of using the same backbone. Yeah, who knows? Again, this might seem abstract. In a minute, I'm going to show you an actual example from my time at the NRO. All right. So how does this solve problems for us? This is the actual important thing. It's not the numeric mumbo jumbo in the matrix. It's before we start scoring stuff, walking around the organization saying, so what the hell is actually important to us? What are we actually trying to do? What actually matters in this work? And what we're really doing is pre-negotiating consensus around, oh, it's feature delivery, and it's speed to market, whatever market means, and it's program expenditure, or whatever it is, whatever the things are. It's getting all of our core stakeholders to agree up front on how are we supposed to be making choices. And now I'm putting a tangible version of that choice-making consensus in front of them, saying like this, we can change it if it's not right, but this is something to start with. It's a way easier conversation than just, what should we do next? Trying to negotiate that across the organization. Especially because a lot of our stakeholders, they have things that are individually important to them based on their own mandates, but aren't necessarily shared priorities. So like, the Chief Information Security Officer really only cares about security, doesn't care about features. Our direct customers who are trying to serve a user community only care about features. They usually don't care about security that much unless something is really broken. Right, so the Venn diagram of their shared interests is really small. There's not much overlap there. So once we do that, once we've got this pre-negotiated consensus, now we've got a space for not now. Now we have a way to push back when the general says, go do this for me, Colonel. You know, General, I would love to. Do you remember 6 months ago, we all decided that saving money was more important than increasing delivery cycle time? Does your thing save more money than ours? Oh, it doesn't? Okay, well, we'll put it in the backlog, and we'll get to it when is the next most money-saving thing. That's a way for us to push back based on these goals that we all are supposed to agree to, that we negotiated up front, and that are usually pretty hard to argue with, coincidentally. That's the way that we kind of norm a bit of consensus when we really need to build a space around a choice so that we can finish something. That's the idea. And the other thing it does for us is because the logic of scaling these values with size means that we want to work smaller things first, usually, if they're similar value. That helps us get people to think in terms of smaller chunks of delivery. Is there a smaller piece of this we could do for you? Because then we could probably get to it sooner. Which is a really helpful and business agility kind of thing to do. So that's the idea. Yeah?
Do you set a time frame for, once you get this consensus, do you set a time frame for the folks that are involved to keep that consensus in place? Or can that shift? Because if that shifts, then you're back to square one and trying to renegotiate your entire backlog.
Yeah. So I think it kind of has to shift. But the idea is whether we're just a few Scrum teams or we're 100-team safe effort or something like that, there's supposed to be a notion that at the portfolio level we're still nimble, but that's not often how we are. The decisions get made once, and then people are just told to go execute them for like a year or more. When we're supposed to be planning and prioritizing and re-engineering as we go, so that at any point we could finish a thing and pick up a new thing, instead of just thinking of it as basically a waterfall that is executed by Agile teams. So it's okay for organizational priorities to change. It's just a matter of when they do, can we make sure that we make that transparent? Can we make sure that we communicate how they changed? What just happened? Right? Yeah. Also, by the way, priorities are going to change anyway, whether we've got a matrix or not, right?
Sure.
So if they do change and we can show people, so look, there's a new sheriff in town, and now here's how things work, because our old customer got detailed back to their home agency, and now we've got a new one, and they don't care about all the things we were doing for you anymore. At least now I can show you what the new rules of the game are, as opposed to just saying, hey, the rules changed, figure it out. So, yeah.
I'm trying to understand the practical possibility of this one, where to basically support your question, how frequently you basically do you recommend to revisit this exercise?
So as often as you need to. So in this case, what we were doing was we were using this to prioritize across 4, depending on headcount, 5 teams, every single sprint. To see the work.
Now what if the value is going to change, the priority is going to change? And if you're in the middle of, because we are looking at not at a story level or a feature level, we are actually looking at a epic or even capability level, top portfolio level, right? So what if you are like half done or half cooked something and...
So that's the other thing about this is we can show people kind of the cost of change. We can show people where we're at a given time. And if you want us to drop what we're doing, here is the context of that choice. So here, let me show you how this worked. And this is just an overblown Excel spreadsheet, okay? So there's nothing magical kind of going on behind the scenes here. But at this point, toward the end of the engagement, we're now 3 teams because we combined some teams. What the teams are doesn't really matter. But what we've got here is, depending on the date, let me scroll backwards in time a little bit. Here are all the high-level efforts for what this team is doing. And largely, what this blue team is doing is standing up COTS and slightly modified COTS products to support identity management. These are the scorings that we're using, so the criteria are future budget and user effort and things like that. And what I'm doing is getting a value score, that's the relative weight here, and scaling it by the size of the thing based on what the team is telling me. So this one at the top here, for example, it's 8% of the value in the matrix, We think it's about 100 points, and that's just a ballpark guess. So that's how we end up with its relative weight. What I've got here is in real time, I'm capturing yesterday's weather, the kind of recent velocity trend for this team. So what is their current average velocity? And then what I'm doing is multiplying that by the number of sprints that are left in the year. So as of whatever apparent date this is, this team, based on their current performance, could probably do that many more points. Understanding that that's going to change over time. Which means, right now in their backlog, we think there's this much work. So if they're going to finish at the moment, based on what we know today, a little under 800 points of stuff, but there's 2,600 points of stuff in their overall program backlog, they're not going to do all that, right? So all I'm doing in the spreadsheet is, by relative weight and size, I'm highlighting everything that currently still fits in the year. And if we make a change, I can show what happens with that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's pretty lightweight, so I can show somebody, if we insert your thing, this falls out of the year. Which is a harder conversation to have if I don't have some way to visualize this stuff. So here, let me show you what this particular program was prioritizing on. I know this text is very small, so let me blow it up a little bit. Oh, maybe too big. All right, whatever. So we're prioritizing on 10 things. 5 of them were the values that we walked around to outside stakeholders. We had an additional 5 that really mattered to us that we didn't necessarily talk about with everybody. You don't have to do it that way. You could have all public ones, all internal ones, whatever it is. So the public ones we called value to enterprise. In this particular program, we had a future budget thing. Would this save us money or cost us money when we were done? Would it save our users time, and if so, how much? If it would save an hour per week for everybody in the organization, that's a 10. That's a really high bar, and it's a high bar on purpose. It shouldn't be easy to get to whatever the top number is. Does it make the system more stable? Does it make the system more secure? Since then, what I've done is I would swap out these kind of vaguer notions of does it make the system more secure for time-based, how soon do we have to do design measures? Does it make our system more scalable? And these were being evaluated by CETA outside resource people. So it wasn't us making the choices, was the idea. We all agreed on how the choices would be made, but the valuations would be being done by someone that basically everybody saw as kind of a neutral party. So that's useful. But we also have these internal ones that matter just as much for our purposes. So, even though we're doing government work and everything we're doing is by mandate, we do sometimes end up in an accidentally competitive position where other programs are building solutions that sound really duplicative. So one of the things we wanted to know about any effort was, hey, does doing this thing make us the go-to solution for the entire enterprise? Because that probably makes us safer. Do we at least become the go-to solution for one other program? That's cool. On the negative side, can we not do our thing unless a bunch of other people do something too? Do we have to explain it to somebody for 45 minutes before they understand why our thing is slightly different than the other solution that they already know about? Maybe we should do something cooler. So that's kind of the idea for that. Dependencies. If we can't finish this work until we finish other stuff, we should probably hold off on it. Visibility. So this was an interesting one. If we make this change to the enterprise, who's going to notice? If they see it as a benefit and everybody notices, great. If we have to do it, but they see it as a pain, would they know it was us that did it? Right? So it kind of can interact with the other things. We might, for a security reason, have to add a step to somebody's workflow. But if that adds a bunch of time to their day that's annoying, do we want to be blamed for it? Especially if we don't have a choice. So that was one of the things. Compliance requirements. The biggest one in this program that I've also used in a lot of places since was budget contributor. If you would like us to do a thing for you, okay, maybe if we have time. Oh, but if you're going to pay for it, you get to skip up the line a bit. Oh, if you already paid for it, yeah, we have to do it this year, or else that's fraud, right? So that was kind of the criteria for that, as opposed to unfunded mandates on the bottom end. Some things I've done since then, for example, would be, I think I mentioned this before, having slightly different scales for some of these things. So at a recent customer, for example, they had this huge problem of committing to work in planning events where they didn't have the infrastructure to do the work. So we're going to promise, these 18 teams are going to promise to do some stuff together, but the middle step of like everything is order a server, and that process for them would take like 6 to 7 months. So I was trying to get them to like stop committing to work that we can't physically do. And that was weirdly controversial. But one of the ways I was trying to get them to understand this was, if we don't today have the servers to do the work, that's negative 100. And then they got really mad about it. Why are all these things automatically negative out of the gate? Because we can't prove that we have the infrastructure. It will flip to positive 50 as soon as we have the tools, right? I don't know. This customer, I used to walk around to teams and I would ask them about like CI and CD stuff, like, do you have tools for that, tools for this? And say, we're not allowed to do virtualization, everything's on my ear. I say, oh, okay. But then I talked to a team once, and they were really excited. We get to pilot virtualization. I said, like, this was 2017. Pilot it? Like, are you not sure that virtualization is real? Yeah, well, you know, that's the way it is here. So we're going to be the first team to do VMs. And I said, that's so cool. We can finally do CD. And he just shook his head. And I said, what's wrong? He said, guess how many VMs I'm allowed to put in a box? Anyway, there you go. All right, so that's it. Like I said, it's kind of a shorter talk. That's the idea. Questions? Yeah.
Where do you do the weighing of these different columns?
So
how do you weigh them?
So in this initial version, I really didn't weight anything. So everything was on a positive 10 to negative 10 scale, and I just added across them. And then they're scaled by whatever we think their size is. So if I zoom out here, and by the way, this sizing was like back of the envelope, the team talking about it for 30 minutes. This was not go spend 3 days away from your desks putting together a ROM and break down all stories. It's just, you know what, I think that's 1,000 points. And that was all the effort we were putting into sizing at that level. We would evolve those over time if we got to the point of actually starting the work and decomposing it. We would replace those with more real numbers. The other thing I can do here, by the way, is I can show for a given team, I don't know if the math is going to work based on the sliders. Let me make it further into this scripture. Let's see if that works. Yeah. So one of the things I could show was kind of where this particular team ran out of year. So, I'm going to leave this line out, but basically, the red line and the blue line represent how high we think we might get in a given year based on their current performance. And I could sum up, what is the total volume of stuff that's currently in that team's Jira backlog? And in case there were things not estimated, I could do the same thing just by counting. Just counting tickets the same way. So I could show different views of that. Which helped me show customers pretty early, it still looks like we've got a lot of runway in sprint 7. And by the time we get to sprint 23, you've put way more stuff in this team's backlog than you're going to deliver. So clearly we are now making choices about what to finish, not when. So. Other questions?
I like your story about the server thing, that you give them negative 100. But did you give them a time frame to resolve it? Nobody wants to see the negative 100. How did you work with them to get the?
So that particular instance, they were a safe-ish framework, 18 teams. So basically, every program increment where we were planning, we were trying to get them to at the negative point was just not committing to program backlog items that we couldn't do today. So they had some infrastructure. So some of the things were completable. They had a positive score in that value. Other things were not. They started at negative until someone told us, yes, we have the servers to do this. Another question?
Yeah, this is really pertinent to your last comment. It has a little less to do with your actual presentation. Containerization versus virtualization. Do you have any comments on that? Where you recommend one versus the other?
No, not really. I mean, do the thing that's going to work. I'm not a technologist. I'm not a developer. So I've been a product owner and a Scrum Master and a trainer and a coach. When it comes to the tooling, use the tooling that works. I do like the idea of, so preface this with my understanding of containerization might be limited in a way that makes this answer sound dumb. So if I'm wrong about stuff, let me know. But the way I think of CI and CD and continuous monitoring is that I'm scripting the build and I'm scripting the environment it's going to be deployed in, and I'm scripting monitoring tools and testing. If we're doing a lot of containerization, my impression is it lets me do things like automated monitoring failover. Like we can detect if an image is bad or if the performance is being degraded, and we can automatically reinstantiate while we think about what just happened, instead of everybody having to come in at 2 in the morning and figure it out. I really like that. But to be honest, I don't know that I could really give you an opinion on what the difference is between virtualization and containerization. That's a different program track to me.
So the only thing is in the containerization, you're sharing the OS level kernel, and whereas in virtualization, you have your own OS version. That's the only difference.
So number of virtual servers versus the copy of data and systems that you're going to get from one to the other. Containerization is more of an image that you're taking from one to the other with the data, systems, software that you have there. Virtualization is basically expanding your servers. So actually both are complementary to each other.
Cool. Other questions and comments? Yeah.
This model, are you aware of any people in your network who have used it and they have benefited from this model?
I don't know, to be honest. If people are using it and having success and not telling me, that would be neat. I've used it in a bunch of places now, and like I say, it's worked for me a lot because it gets me past the why you're making this choice kind of conversation. The only place, like I say, it didn't work, I had a customer where their work was kind of split across a bunch of teams into 2 portfolios. We stood this up with one portfolio and they seemed to like it. We tried to stand it up with the other portfolio, and they were really mad that we started with the assumption that we could use the same criteria, even though they both were part of the same office and same program and working with the same testing groups and the same infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. But we are snowflakes. How dare you presume that we would want to save money like we're supposed to, like the other people want to save money, or that we want our systems more stable like they do. To which my response is, cool, what are your goals? I don't really care what they are. I just want you to tell me what they are. I just gave you these first 8 things as a starting point, right? I'm not telling you this is what it has to be. They were really mad that I told them what it has to be. That's not what I said, but whatever. Yeah.
Have you found that this works better with teams who already have a baseline knowledge of different, like Agile or Scrum or SAFe? Are they already kind of full-on engaged in these practices, or are they just starting out? Because I would think this would be a little bit challenging for them. I mean, just even at that first step of getting to the consensus on what the goals are going to be, that in and of itself is a heavy lift for a lot of folks.
It is. So I've only ever done this with Agile teams. I don't imagine it would hurt if we were doing something else, but I haven't tried it in any other context. The thing about this is it's a lot like, the reason it's so hard to imagine all the requirements at the start of a project, right, is it's hard to imagine the perfect solution when we're staring at an empty whiteboard. So don't ask the customer for this if you're a contractor, for example. Don't say, hey, can you give me these things? Read their mission statement, read their program documentation, read what their mandate is, and suggest some stuff. Hey, I think your organizational goals are these 4 things. Does that look right to you? Well, yes, these 2. But you're forgetting about this, this, and this, and you don't really care about that. Hey, we just figured it out. Right? That's the first step. Sure. It's always easier to react to something than it is to imagine it.
There's two levels. There's like the aggregate level, kind of strategic level, that's the 1,000 points.
Yep.
We use this at a more tactical team, individual team level.
Yeah, I've also used this as a way to get individual product owners off the dime to make a choice.
So you could have hundreds of stories, various sizes, and this is work.
Yeah. The only issue is trying to size 100 things is really annoying, and trying to assess value on these things is really annoying. If we could bucket them into higher level efforts.
So like,
I hate the word epic because for me it usually means
Yeah,
that we're about to
feature.
engage in an anti-pattern. But yeah.
So how often do you maintain your spreadsheet?
So every time something new came up, we would score the new thing.
Oh,
And also we were always asking, hey, are we still looking at the red stuff?
so
So-
how every
So, I mean, kind of, so with this initial offering, when I first started doing this, we were looking at it across these 4 or 5 teams every 2 weeks on every team.
every 2 months?
Because the overall customer was the same, right? So that was kind of one program conversation every 2 weeks. The real time to look at it is when you have a feeling something is wrong. So the question I would get a lot is like, well, what if the matrix tells us that we should be doing a thing that we know is not the most important thing? Well, it's just a matrix, so we could ignore it. But if it's telling us that to do something else other than what we want to do, either we're not doing the right thing or I'm assessing value wrong, and maybe we need to adjust the matrix. So that's usually the clue is, are we still looking at the right stuff? Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Will you be able to share your spreadsheet?
I can't share that particular spreadsheet, but I can share the slides. All right, well, thank you very much. That's me. If you do Twitter, my Twitter is Agile only. Sometimes it's jokes, but they're Agile jokes. It won't be like me yelling at Panera about a sandwich or anything. So, and then if you do LinkedIn, by all means, reach out and connect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, great group.
Thank you. Good.